Welcome back to the second part of the patient experience webinars. We chat about the people, process, and tools in order to help improve the business systems inside your dental office. So in order to hear a little bit about who we are and what we got going on, this is a second part, right? So if you haven't listened to the first part, go back to the first part and listen through there. In that first section, we really cover the patient experience up until when they get into the office. In this section, we really want to cover what happens when they're in the clinical area, right? Either with the hygienist, with the doctor, and then what happens post-treatment, right? When they go out and they start, when they're checking out, et cetera. And so we're going to go and dive into that a little bit. Laura, though, let's go ahead and start with the clinical side, right? Where are the areas that you see people struggle in a dental office when they naturally don't kind of focus on these things or try to improve these things? What are the biggest areas for improvement?
Well, the number one thing that I would say is your schedule. And I know this is about the experience, but when we tell a patient, show up at 2:00, the appointment's at 2:00, and they get in and they check in time, and then they sit in the reception area for 15 minutes because we're running behind, right there is a negative experience. So just having a schedule that runs on time, making sure that we have systems in place when they check in, that we can get them back into the chair on time. Not only does that make us more efficient, but also it makes the experience better for the patient. I mean, they're busy, they've got things to do. The next thing is making sure, excuse me, the next thing is making sure that we're not just talking about numbers with our patients. Many times, if you go talk to an average patient out on the street about their dental experience, they'll say when they first started with your office, they felt like family. Now they feel like a number, because we talk about their insurance codes, we talk about their tooth number, we talk about their surface. We don't actually say, how was your summer? How was the trip to France? Like, welcome back to the practice. So slowing down for 2 minutes and actually having a conversation with the patient before you stick your hands in their mouth, before you seat them in the chair, like, remember, this is a human that we're dealing with. And then the next thing to get them out of the reception area is how you greet them. And I teach us a lot on Front Office Rocks. You know, you think about when you go to a restaurant. You know, have you ever followed the hostess where you walk up and they're like, do you want a table for 6? Sure, follow me. And then they take off and you're like, are we supposed to go now? And they're walking, almost running to the table. A lot of times our clinical team members will do that. Like, Mrs. Jones, follow me. And they'll just barrel down to the operatory because they're in a hurry. We got to get them sad. And think about the hostesses we like. How's your day going? Follow me. Hang your purse up here. Okay, great. Make yourself comfortable. So there's so many transitions from the front office just to getting them in the clinical area that we're so focused on getting the job done that we forget that's a human that we're dealing with. So just that transition alone from the reception area to operatory, I think, is a big one to focus on with the team.
And I'm going to expand on that too a little bit, especially with new patients, right? As you're walking patients back, patients, like human beings, we have a physical connection to the space around us, right? Which influences how we feel about something. So one of the things that we started implementing that was a huge benefit to our organization was that we started giving tours, right? For the first visits. I mean, and so we would come in and we'd say, hey, here's a cone beam. You'll probably need one of these, just so you know, here's what it does, and here's why it's special, and here's why it's unique for our office, and not every office has it, right? Or you can go down and say, hey, here's the reason why we decorated this. Our doctor owner is really into this, right? I love the fact that you guys used to have like the rock and roll theme, right? Reason why, because now all of a sudden you're building these connections with these patients, and they're starting to understand the space around them. Like, okay, I feel comfortable enough to go here now because you showed me where the restrooms were, right? I understand that I will be coming here in order to get my exam. It's not like I'm getting out of my element every time you pull me to a new area. So I think that these first impression tours are a big deal, and they're a great way to be able to either have a hygienist or a dental assistant connecting with that patient, because now you have time to actually talk where you don't always have time to just chat when you're in the chair. And then I think that go into your part of making sure that you understand that, hey, this is a human being and these have needs and wants and desires, etc. We'd always teach our team members to say, hey, make sure that in the notes for your appointment for that day, you're putting 1 or 2 small things that you learned about the patient. And we really emphasize this for the typical dental assistant that was passionate about the clinical side, that was not naturally the human element or the personal side of it, right? So we would tell them like, hey, you need to pick your 3 go-to questions that you can ask every patient, and then you need to document them and ask them about it on their second visit. And that gave them a structure to feel comfortable in something that they may not naturally be comfortable in.
Right. Right.
You
All
know,
right.
one of
So
the,
now, oh, go ahead,
uh,
JW.
Well, I was thinking about Tanner. We actually had one of our offices do this. They were utilizing a remote team member to, for new patients. They would call them and explain to them what the expectations were when they came into the office, right? They would do just that. They would say, hey, we just want to follow up. Brenda loves to use the term reserve time for you. So she would say, you know, hey, the doctor has reserved time for you tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We wanted to confirm your appointment, but we also wanted to let you know what the process is. You should be on time. We're going to give you a quick tour of our office, and then we're going to answer any questions you have before your initial treatment. And I think it's the personalization that, as you pointed out prior in the prior one as well, has gotten to very business oriented, and we haven't personalized that. And so I would ask the question, Tanner, you touched on a little bit, but you know, I love it when I go to the dentist or the doctor and they say, hey, how's Wade doing? What's he doing now? What's Peyton up to these days? And they're asking about your kids by name. They may not even remember you talked about them the last time or what it was, but they'll say, hey, how are they doing? The last time they did a good job. And obviously they've made notes somewhere for this, right? But how do you do that better, Laura? How do you let them know what those expectations are? And as Tanner pointed out, make the doctor or the assistant or the hygienist really interact more.
Actually, I love that example that you just gave. Okay, so prior to outsourcing, before outsourcing was a thing in our industry, what you just said about that call and that welcome to the practice, and we're going to give you a tour. I was thinking as an office manager, we don't have enough time. There's not enough time to do these calls. But now Absolutely. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great customer service thing to do, to have somebody actually call and make the person feel comfortable and tell them what to expect. Because that's actually what's going to lead me into my next thing, is that people are nervous when they come to the dental office. I mean, it doesn't matter. They could be totally calm when they're driving up, having a great day. But the second we put them in the operatory, before anybody's even put gloves or masks on, they're white knuckles and they're like, right? So the number one thing that I think we can do for customer service is give them the expectation of what's going to happen next. Explain to them the process. Make sure that someone's an advocate for them. And your dental assistants or your hygienist or whoever clinically is there chairside with them, that's their role. Their role is to be an advocate for that patient. And if it means touching their hand or using their name or asking them about their kids or whatever they need to do to get their mind off of what's happening to them, it's not all that bad, but patients build this up in their head. The more we can help them focus on a better experience and less on the dentistry and what's happening, the better. And I know the dentists appreciate it. You know, when you can have the patient hearing a story or talking about their kids or whatever, so the dentist can focus on what they need to do, because clinically, this is the one time we need to be in the dental box, is when the dentist is in there, right? The other thing I would say with that, and then I'll pass it off to you guys, because Tanner, I'm sure you've got some tools that will help too. For me, it's also the handoffs. And it's not just handoffs from the front desk to the back or the back to the front. It's a handoff every time we change the main person taking care of the patient. So when the dentist comes in, the hygienist does a handoff to what's to happen next and what we've talked about. When the dentist leaves, they do a handoff back to the hygienist or back to the assistant. It's a verbal handoff, because patients and people in general want to feel like there's good control, that they know what's going to happen next, that they know what to expect. Compare it to the medical industry. The last time you went to a doctor's appointment, they put you in one of those paper robes and they sat you in a room and nobody came in for 15, 20 minutes and you're wondering if they even remembered you. That's bad control. People don't like that. We don't like that feeling. We want to know who's coming next, what's happening next. I'm going to do that cone beam, or I'm going to do that scan, or we're doing x-rays and this is why. So explaining it to the patient and helping them feel that you've got things under control, I think is huge. Tanner, you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think that with these, I've tried a lot of different technologies, because it does ultimately, in the clinical side of the patient experience, it comes down to communication amongst your team, right? Is that fluid and natural? And I've seen so many offices do so many different things, right? Some have walkie-talkies, some have chats, some of them use signs, some of them hand off papers, some of them just go and tap them on the shoulder or stand there anxiously, which is always uncomfortable. But I haven't seen a silver bullet in this. I mean, some of the ones that I've seen have just been like, there's a form, that a little tiny piece of paper that has some questions of like, hey, have I met this patient? When did I meet them? What is some information about them? And then when the hygienist is ready for the doctor to come in, they'll give them that slip. And so A, they know that they're ready, but B, they also already know about the patient before they come in. They can go and review any information about that patient as they needed. That was one of the ones I've seen the most effective. But again, radio chats I've seen mixed reviews on them. Same thing with chat messages within the system. So it's one of those things you got to just figure out. I don't think that anyone has it perfectly built, but all in all, again, just as we emphasized in the first episode where we said, make sure that you're taking the time to do role playing, to do training. You've got to do the same thing with your clinical team. How do you actually do patient tours? How do you actually do a handoff effectively? How do you make sure that you're communicating these things and practicing them is the only way to really make sure that you get it done right.
I think the thing to remember too is, and I talked about this in the first episode, is why are we doing this? Like, what is the point behind it? So a handoff isn't just for us, it's also for the patient. You know, the communicating in front of the patient. Like, I mean, we were a big headset. We wore headsets in our office, the radios, and we talked. And I don't think any conversation needs to be whispered behind the 12 o'clock cabinet. I think it can be done in front of the patient. I think the handoffs are on purpose for us and the patient. And so when your team fully understands and is trained on why we're doing these things, like what's the purpose behind it, ultimately they can then learn how to do it well and make sure the experience is great. So I would say definitely, you know, investing in knowing why, and then also training your team. JW, do you have any thoughts on this before we move to the final walkout of the patients?
No, it's just so important. I mean, I can think of that. You made me think of a time, and I've got a wonderful dentist that I've gone to for years, and even if I was just in there for a hygiene appointment, and it wasn't just because I knew them, they always made a point to come by and say hello, right? Even if it was, maybe they were going to do a checkout, right? But sometimes it was just being greeted. And I think the doctor's time gets so busy sometimes. It is too fast and in and out. I think just having, you mentioned earlier, 2 minutes. If you could just take 2 minutes and spend some time, is it worth? I would probably say it this way: is it worth 2 minutes of your time to keep that patient, right? And can you just take 2 minutes out of your day and interact, show a little empathy, and spend some time with them? And I think that's getting lost in the drive for EBITDA and the drive for more revenue and more offices and bigger and better. It's, you know, we're kind of forgetting the most important part. That's that patient experience.
Actually, so Tanner, you told the story about the new patient tour, and I went and saw a speaker years ago who talked about the new patient tour. And literally, I laugh when you say that. Like, I think it's a great idea, especially to point out the technology. If you've got this great technology, they should know it. But this person was talking about you should show them where the restrooms are in case they need the restroom, and where the extra toilet paper is in the drawer under the sink. And I was like, okay, now we're getting so focused on the new patient. I'm like, I think they can figure it out if they're in there with no toilet paper, where to look, right? Agreed. But you bring up a good thing, JW. We focus so much on the new patients, sometimes we forget about our existing patients.
Absolutely.
The ones spent money to get into your practice, that you've wowed them that first new patient experience. What about every single time after that? And the number one problem in every dental office in the United States, or most dental offices, I shouldn't say everyone, most dental offices in the United States, is we have a backdoor problem. We're losing active patients out of the back door. So we're so focused on the new patient calls and in the marketing and getting more new patients in. It's the back door that if we could learn to close that back door, we're going to lose less patients. We wouldn't need as many new patients, or our practices would be growing. And there's two reasons that I think we have a backdoor problem. One is customer service, and one is our systems. So if your patients feel like they started as a family member, but now they feel like a number, it means that we're not giving our existing patients, every time they come in, they should go, I remember why I chose this practice. I remember why I love this practice. But if we're not doing that for our existing patients, eventually they're going to get, go to somebody down the street, or they're going to find some reason not to come. And the second thing is our systems. If your systems are broken, you're not doing handoffs, you're not doing a morning huddle, you're not doing reactivation calls. Your team's so busy, they don't have time to do reactivation calls, and you're not outsourcing it, whatever, you're going to lose patients out of the back door. So the number one thing I suggest, that if nothing else, all this whole first 2 episodes with me, is figure out if you've got a backdoor problem and where you can tweak it. Because a little bit of tweaking with customer service and systems, and you'll definitely start to close the back door.
I love that. A lot of times I'll speak to a doctor or an office, and they want to brag to me about how many new patients they had for the month. Oh, we're averaging 172 new patients. And you're like, well, that's a problem. I mean, you shouldn't be able to bring that many new patients in. When you hear them brag about new patients, you're like, okay, well, you've been in business for 18 years, so something's wrong here, right? You're losing them faster than you're gaining them. So you're right. I think it is about that patient experience, and that gets lost. And you couldn't be more right. What is a one-time patient worth who comes in for a checkup and a cleaning versus somebody who stays with you for 25 years? I mean, that ROI is tremendous, right? So spend some time. Exactly.
Yeah, you have a higher chance of case acceptance with somebody who's been in your practice 5 or 10 years and they're ready to do that implant or that crown than that new patient who knows nothing about you and is still trying to decide if they're gonna spend money in your practice. So
and they're not going to Google price shopping, right? They're not going to go on and say, "Oh, I need an implant. I know I need this," so they're not going to go check out. They're just going to go to their dentist, right? You're not going to ask about who should they go see. That you're going to go to your trusted advisor. So yeah, it's big deal. Tanner, you were going to talk about kind of the checkout piece as well.
Yeah, checkout piece and a financial one. I know that we've got a segment on RCM and kind of billing and stuff like that, and we can get into the patient billing side of this, but and just because of time, I don't want to go too deep into how do we make sure that we're presenting treatment in such a way that it gets accepted, et cetera. But I'm just kind of curious from your perspective of once you've had the patient leave the office, what do you do in order to make sure that you enhance that patient experience post-appointment? Laura, what are your thoughts on that?
well, so the average case acceptance in a dental office, last metrics I saw was about 36%, where they actually are accepting the full treatment plan in the practice. And so many times patients are leaving and we're letting them think about it, or they're going to wait, or we're going to follow. Well, what happens is we get so busy, patient leaves and we say, okay, great, we'll follow up with you, or we'll call your insurance or whatever. But we're so busy, we don't follow up with the patient. Now, we tell the patient 2 or 3 times when they're in the office, they need this crown, they need this crown, they need this crown. And then the patient leaves without the appointment, which we'll talk about that in a future episode, because doing it at the front desk while the patient's 4 steps away from the front door is the last place you should really be presenting treatment. But the patient leaves and then we don't have any follow-up. What is that patient thinking? Do I really need this? Like, is it that important? Like, were they just after my insurance because I have $1,000 left? Like, think about that experience. And if we're not doing a consistent follow-up with that patient, if we don't understand the importance of continually communicating with our patients on all aspects, reactivation, recall, outstanding treatment plan, like your team members or technology or outsource need to be regularly reaching out to our patients. Because like we said in the first episode, the second they leave the office, the last thing they want to think about is having to get dentistry done or coming back. So we need to make sure that our experience, and ultimately, why is that? And this is the training for the team. It's not about the revenue. It's not about production. It's not about the schedule. It's about helping our patients keep their teeth for life. It's about helping our patients live longer and live a better life. So when your team member fully understands, or whoever's working on your team, that our job, they don't love what we do. We put drills and needles in their mouths, but our job is to help them keep their teeth for life. So I'm going to care enough about this patient that I may have to call them 3, 4, 5 times. They may have to get a text message. They may have to get an email. But my job is to help them keep their teeth for life. There's a whole different energy about it. And that is customer service. When the patients feel like you're caring about them enough to take the time to follow up with them, answer the questions, get the things worked out so they can come in and get the dentistry done.
Yeah, I would probably add to that. I think it's always nice, especially if you've had, a very long procedure or a very invasive procedure. I think doing a follow-up call, right? And again, that falls back into just showing that empathy, whether you've had an implant or whether you've had a crown, and want to, just showing the ability to really give that customer service. I know, it happens to me with getting my oil changed sometime, right? My gosh, I go spend $75 and somebody calls me and asks me, hey, you were in here yesterday. Just want to make sure everything went all right. Is there any other questions you have? And I'm like, I just got an oil change. So if you're going to be drilling and filling on their mouth, right? Maybe a quick phone call to just say, hey, we just want to see how everything went. Your follow-up appointment is so-and-so. And I think it's, Laura, you mentioned it too. It's about focusing in on the wellness and the health of our patients, right? It's not about the revenue, or it's not about fixing a problem, but it's the long-term health wellness of our patient. And that's part of the experience in my mind.
As a team member, I hear and talk to team members all the time, and they say, well, the doctor or my DSO or the group, they're all about the numbers. It's all about the numbers. The numbers just represent how many patients we're helping at the end of the day. And you can't pay on smiles. You can't judge on happy teeth. You have to put some numbers to it, but the numbers represent taking care of patients. So ultimately, that's why we focus on the numbers, because we are not a non-for-profit. We do have to make sure everybody gets taken care of and paid, but we do it by taking care of our patients. And when your team really fully understands that, and we have our systems and our technology and our people trained in the right way, that's what we're here for, is that patient experience, because that's how the patients judge us. And that's how they decide whether or not they're going to do the dentistry in our practice. And I would like to just say, what kind of thing did you get done, JW? It was an oral change? Was that? I'm not
we got my oral change.
Oral change.
I got to get my oral changed over at the shop. You don't ever go to the gas station and get your oral changed.
Okay. I just want to make sure we didn't miss that. So we could drop a little humor in here. I didn't know there was an R in the word oil. So this is good. I'm learning.
Hello. Golly, where you been? That reminds me of my favorite part, y'all, right? The benefit of using the word y'all is it's singular and plural. You can just say y'all, and then plural is all y'all. So just a little bit of fun there.
Now we're getting an English lesson. This is when you got to end it.
Exactly. It's
all
the
right,
end of the podcast.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward then to chatting on the next one, which is about marketing.